in special education, school climate, and teacher evaluation, sort of juggling those. Nick comes with just great expertise, a former fourth grade teacher, a former assistant principal, a former special education coordinator, and then in the sort of private school special education world was managing and running multiple school programs, not just one school. So we are fortunate to have somebody who is just incredibly skilled. And when you sort of imagine somebody who's going to roll up their sleeves and get in and work with kids, that is Mr. DeCesare, that is Nick. He's in classrooms, talking to teachers, talking with students, working in small groups with kids. And one of the expertise that he brings and that he'll talk about today is called restorative practices. It is a complements the choose kind message. In our classrooms, we have something called responsive classroom. It's an overall approach to how we create a classroom community. You may have heard your child talk about morning meeting. It's a time we get together at the beginning of the day. There's some sharing in a circle. There's talking about things that are going to happen during the day. There's a way to connect with other kids in your room. Sometimes it's goofy, and fun. We all take off our shoe and you throw one shoe in there and you pick up somebody else's shoe and you can read them. But it is a fun way to just create that community. Restorative practices complements that with almost like a deeper level of conversation. Also, Nick has part of this, and Nick's got some really great training in this and experience. It's about conflict resolution. So how do we resolve a conflict between two students or a group of students, or even if there's a tension between a teacher and a child? That it takes that conflict and thinks about it as what is the learning experience we need. And that's strongly what I think in elementary school. There is a place, unfortunately, at times we have to have consequences, but ultimately we want students to learn, right? We want them to learn how to interact, how to have conflict, how to resolve that, so that they carry the skills on towards middle school and high school. So that's a really long introduction to Nick DeCesare. Thank you, Nick, for joining us. So I'm going to sort of click away here as Nick kind of gives the background. We have a short video embedded in here as well. Nick, see anything?
No.
All right, just let me know when you want me to click.
So good morning and thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity today to speak to you for a short amount of time, but certainly enough time to give you a good overview of restorative practices and what we're doing here at Branchville and what restorative practices is really all about. I'm not going to read this word for word, but one of the things we talk about with restorative practices is that it's a philosophy. It's an approach to working with students and helping them on the social emotional components that they need to be successful at school. So really the key to restorative practices is building community and having that really strong communication throughout the school. I've utilized restorative practices and seen it and put it into action in another school system before I came here. And one of the fantastic things about Branchville is that there already was this awesome foundation of community here, which makes the job of rolling out restorative practices all the more easier for someone that's going about doing it. This continuum really touches on the different components of restorative practices in a school system. And one of the things that when we work with our staff, when we talk about this continuum, is when we look at the real formal side and we look at that triangle, formal conference, that's an area that the schools really don't get into too much. A formal conference sometimes happens in the community when there may be some type of crime committed and there needs to be a formal conference. There is going to be a restorative conference to bring everyone together. I'll give you an example of that. In 2004, there was a famous case in Bucks County, Pennsylvania there's a documentary called Burning Bridges. And Burning Bridges was this story about 6 college students who came home from college, and really fantastic students, always had good grades. The families were known in the community as being great families. So they college and decided one night that they were going to go and burn down this really famous historical covered bridge in town. And they did it, and they succeeded. And there was outrage in the community. And the International Institute of Restorative Practices, which is housed in Pennsylvania, and does a whole lot of training and work throughout the country on restorative practices, offered a formal conference to the community and said, before we decide to tar and feather these kids, let's have a formal conference and come together and get all the players in the community together to talk about what happened, what the effect was on the community, how we can go about moving forward and heal the harm that's been done. And so that's what they did. And they had this really successful formal conference and brought these families in and brought members of the community in. And everyone had this fantastic discussion led by the Institute of International Institute of Restorative Practices. And the judge in the case could have given them up to 2 years of prison time, but he actually took the documentary that was made and looked through the formal conference and decided it would be best to focus on restitution instead. And I don't know how they came up with the figure, but each child, each young man in this case, had to pay $66,666 back in restitution. And it really highlighted what a formal conference can do in a given situation. The community felt a whole lot better discussing that and working with the families. The parents, of course, were mortified. But in the end, what came out of that formal conference was a lot of success. Unfortunately, the bridge, was gone, but it was rebuilt over time. And I just read an article recently that here we are today in 2018. 2 of the boys have completely paid back that amount, and the other 4 are still making payments, and they've since have rebuilt the bridge. So I talk about that case because you're going to hear me talk about the fact that the state of Connecticut has asked us to move away in schools from this really strong punitive approach, which the data shows and the research shows is not too successful. When we give students these punitive measures of dealing with actions that happen in school, they're often, recommitting, if you can say that, or having the same behavior again. And so we're back to square one. Well, we suspended them in school for a day or 2. Didn't that fix the problem? No, not even close. So where we focus in schools is on the first 4 triangles. And I'm actually going to work from the circle at group or circle, and I'll work my way back. Circle activities are done in classrooms, and they're very powerful because they move beyond just a simple question, a simple greeting that responsive classroom might be addressing during a morning meeting. And these particular circles in restorative practices go into a deeper understanding of some issue that may be happening in the classroom or in the school that students need to discuss, and they talk about their feelings about it and how we're going to go about solving a particular situation. I talk to students, when we do these circles, we talk about really 3 different things. One is the talking piece, and the way the circle operates is there's always a talking piece. It could be something like a little stuffed animal. It could be something that someone created that might be near and dear to your heart. I used one the other day that one of my daughters, my 7-year-old daughter, had created for me. She made this one too. This is some simple sand art. And the kids like to see that you're bringing something to the table, your talking piece that is important to you, that means something to your family, that maybe was created by a child. If you have children, they always like to relate to that type of thing. And the talking piece is to be used throughout the circle and can only be used by the person that's speaking. So that's really obviously the main thought behind it. It goes from student to student. If you'd like to share throughout the circle, you need to have the talking piece in your hand. So the other 2 things I talk about is I ask students to talk from the heart, and I explain what that means. And that talking from the heart means they talk about their true feelings. So they talk about how they feel on that topic. They're not being influenced by the person next to them. They're not being influenced by, you know, what someone else said. They talk from their own heart about how they feel in a given situation. And that's extremely important to us in the circles to really get a pulse on each student's social emotional state for a particular problem we're talking about. And then finally, we ask them to listen from the heart. We respect other people's viewpoints. We listen to what everyone has to say. And we make sure we're not interrupting people as they're talking piece. I've also seen circles happen at home with families. I've used them myself, and they've been very effective to solve those problems. Maybe we're having a problem at home with keeping things clean and neat and orderly. I'm very chop, chop, chop in my house, and my significant other is very, let's just let things go. But sometimes we need to come together as a family and have a circle, and we use a talking piece, and we talk about how everyone's feeling. My 6-month-old is out of the loop right now, but we make sure she's there as part of the family, and she's, you know, participating just by being, because that's extremely important that we make her part of the circle despite the fact that she doesn't have, you know, the talking ability right now. So circles can also work very well in families as long as you lay down the expectations and set the rules. Talking piece, listen from the heart, talk from the heart, and that's how we move forward. Everyone's viewpoint is heard and listened. Some of the questions that could come up during circles, you can see up here, these are some prompts that may occur in the classroom. How would your best friend describe you? What would you not want to change about our classroom and why? What change would you like to see in our classroom? What can you do to help make the change? And then what is it like for you when someone is angry at you? So these types of questions move beyond like that morning meeting greeting that happens with responsive classroom, which is also important. But these start to get a little more deeper into that social emotional well-being of a child by finding out how they're feeling in a given situation. And it allows the teacher to start to get a pulse on each individual student and how they're feeling in given situations and what more work they may need to do or what more help they may need in trying to help a child's social emotional state, feeling confident in school, wanting to come to school, feeling like they're accepted, because we constantly say, we constantly know, and the research shows, if we don't get that social emotional piece in order and we don't have the well-being in a great spot for each child, they're probably not going to reach their full academic potential. And we know that. So it's important that first and foremost, that social emotional base is addressed and students are feeling good about school and about themselves. We went into the 5th grade classroom, and the 5th grade classroom, we decided to do a circle to talk about how to better foster community in the cafeteria during lunch. And that's a nice way of saying they're having some struggles during lunch. And we needed to talk about it. Great kids, every one of them. Fantastic boys and girls in that room. But it was a great way to just kind of, address and remind them what choose time looks like in the cafeteria. And we did it through a circle. So we're going to show this quick video in a few minutes. Of course, that's me. And you're going to see just me speaking mostly, but one of the focuses of these circles is obviously you want to hear from every student. We allow students to pass if they don't feel comfortable talking about a particular issue. We don't make them talk about what they don't feel comfortable talking about. That again defeats the purpose. If during a circle that you're running, if you're doing circles every day and you're constantly having a student pass, that might be something that we need to look into as to why, maybe have some further conversation with the student in private, away from the other students about why they're not feeling comfortable participating. So you'll see how this circle kind of is run and led.
So while this is loading, I just wanted to add, we edited out the student responses because it is a fairly sensitive kind of conversation. And so that's why you're going to hear really just Mr. DeCesare's voice, but it will give you a sense of the structure.
Around the circle is to talk about an issue that we're having as a community, as a 5th grade community, because we're all together in this, in the cafeteria. So that's our discussion today. I'm going to get to that and talk about how we're going to get to that in our circle. I have 2 rules in the circle. The first rule is you speak from the heart. And that means you talk about what's on your mind and you tell the truth about what's on your mind. It's not about what somebody else thinks. It's not about what you think you should say. It's how you really feel in your heart about the issue or topic that we're talking about. And then the second rule I have is that you listen from the heart. So we talk from the heart and we listen from the heart. And what does that mean? Well, listening from the heart means you listen respectfully to your classmates. Everyone's viewpoint is appreciated and shared and celebrated because you might have differences in opinion. And the third thing is the talking piece. If you don't have the talking piece, you're listening from the heart. When you do have the talking piece, you're speaking from the heart if you feel like it. I don't make people talk. When we pose a question to the circle, when we start passing around our talking piece, you can pass. You don't have to speak. I'd rather hear from you. I love hearing from you. I want to hear what you have to say. But if you're uncomfortable with the question, or you're really not sure how to answer it, you just quietly pass and hand it to the next person. But the talking piece is to be respected and appreciated. This talking piece I brought today because my daughter made it for me with Sandar, and I thought it would be a really good talking piece for us to use. So, she's in next year? Great. And I'm going to start because I have a talking piece anyway. And I respect, the individual that I respect the most in my life is my grandmother. And I respect my grandmother the most because she's always been there for me in my life. She's always given me fantastic advice. She's loved me no matter what. And I respect her, I think, the most because she's been through some really tough situations in her life. And she's always seems to come. So today we talk about in our circle really what respect meant to us, because we all, most of us, identified someone in our life that we really respect. And I respect too the people that passed because they didn't have, they didn't feel comfortable sharing, they may not have had an idea at first, but I'm sure when we get together they will share. And we also talk about that we need to improve as a community in the cafeteria. And we gave some examples about how we do that. All right, everyone stand up there. Let's close in our circle a little bit more. Let's get as close as we can. I don't quite. All right, I'm going to put a paw in here. And we need to come up with a second. Okay, we'll do that. No, we can't do it. I like that. 1, 2, 3. Yes. Remember, we're all a community here, working together, supporting one another. Right? That's what it's all about, supporting one another. Are we going up or down? Down? Oh, okay. 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
All right, good job.
1 class.
Today, the reason
what Representative said. So the Nick's purpose here was twofold. One, it is a conversation we will want to have with our fifth graders, and we're going to sort of replicate it across the classroom, classrooms a few times. Also, we're all learning about this. Our teachers are learning about this. I've had the fly-by-night course. Nick has had extensive training in this. So we're also all sort of going to learn from videos and experiences like this. We've done some training with staff, but we have more to do.
Please stop me at any time if you have questions.
I have a question that's sort of related to this. So it seems like with a program like this, one of the biggest pieces that you want to have students buy in, right? The choose kind, you want to have students buy in. So for me, I know we all hear things now. So my question is, A, how do you get students to buy in? And B, as a person in your position or in your position, you're going to find out where they're being bullied or, from all different sources, right? So I want to know how it is that we, or that you guys, or if this is possible, to have some cross checks. Like, if this parent had to come into me because their child went to them and said, I am being bullied, do we have ways throughout the classroom? A group session is great where they all sit at the top, but are there informal writings where they can speak, anonymous? you know, or safe, and that it's going to be protected. I think you get my point, but can we create ways in which we have multiple areas to check in on each student so that nobody falls, you know, in the cracks and we have no idea what they're hurting?
Sorry.
No, I'll start. You know, so I think it's, the key there is the relationship that a child has with another adult. And usually they're class group children, right? That if they're feeling uncomfortable, that one of the most significant things we can do is to have one adult, one really trusted adult that they have in the building, that they can say something is bothering them. And that's what the research says too, that outside of your immediate family, and it doesn't mean if your child's truly being bothered by something, they should have one other trusted adult outside of your immediate family that they can feel quite comfortable going to. And that can be someone being unkind to me on the playground. But as students get older, it is really quite significant that they have that person as they deal with much more significant issues, right, in middle school and high school. So it is our hope that we try to make those connections between a classroom teacher and a student in the way that they build community. And if it's not your classroom teacher, perhaps it's an essentialist. Perhaps you know that if I go to Mr. DeCesare or Mr. Marbles, I can report that. So I think it's continuing messaging like that. You know, when there is a sort of an exceptional circumstance, sometimes we do develop strategies in which a child can report. Through a variety of like little messages to the right person. I don't know if you guys want to add.
Yeah, I mean, you know, relationships are most important. I remember when I was in Stratford, Janet Robinson, you know, who went through the Newtown tragedy, was our superintendent. And Janet never spoke in our meetings ever about what happened. But Janet put things in place in Stratford to address the social emotional well-being of each child. And one of the things Janet always focused on, which was the very first thing that Keith just mentioned, is establishing a relationship with each child immediately right off the bat. And once you establish a relationship with each and every child in the classroom, you start to get a pulse on what's happening with them on a daily basis. And you're not going to find out everything. And you make a great point, you know, what about the children that don't buy into this, where things are happening behind the scenes that you don't know? And it's very difficult to know every single thing going on with every single child, and certainly that's not what you're saying we need to do. But what is important is that we have things in place to address the needs of each child. If we have children that we've established relationships with and are struggling, we'll immediately address it by putting, you know, some type of system or things in place to give them more support throughout the day. We'll ask parents to come in and talk to us and work with us. And of course, we'll ask our parents to be very honest with what they're seeing and feeling in a given situation. I get, you know, weekly emails and phone calls from parents, as does Keith, as we're kind of working together to figure out different situations that are happening that are really on the social emotional level, not so much academic. And it's our job to come together as a team here and address those needs. And it's extremely important, I know, to Keith, and he said this from my first day here, that that social emotional component and that relationship building is essential to then getting to the academic piece. And Janet used to say the same thing, that we can't get to the academic piece, and I mentioned this earlier, and the full academic potential of each child unless they're feeling good about themselves in school. And until we can get them in that place, they're not going to reach their full potential. They're just not, most likely. So I don't know if that answers your question. I know some pieces may be, again, a little vague, but that's kind of how we go about, you know, things here.
Mark?
Sorry. So based on that video, I understand how this works we have a problem in the cafeteria in general, and addressing that. How does it work in terms of more specific, this kid and this kid?
I'm going to get to that.
Oh,
Yeah, this is a whole class approach. What coming up next in the presentation is actually...
So we're going to work our way down and continue, but that's a fantastic question. I like to put this slide up. There's many, many schools throughout the country that use restorative practices have recently shifted to restorative practices and swear by it and see fantastic results. The two schools here, there's a couple in Maryland and one in Pennsylvania, and it just shows the decrease in office referrals, and they also have a whole sheet on suspension data and so on, which has been fantastic to see. The state of Michigan last year enacted a law that included restorative practices that now has schools making sure that they've considered, that's the language in the law, considered restorative practices before suspending or expelling any student throughout the entire state. So restorative practices is certainly becoming extremely important and being recognized as being extremely important throughout the country. And Dr. Freiberg, Joanne Freiberg from the state of Connecticut, who kind of leads this charge here in the state, has been really rolling out restorative practices district to district by training not just administrators, but entire staff. And I was lucky enough to go through her 3-day training when I was in Stratford, again led by Janet Robbins. So moving our way down the continuum, there's effective statements. And this is really kind of the first line of defense, if you will, when we're talking about restorative practices, and even in your own homes. And I use effective statements non-stop in my setting. Because she's starting to get to that age where she's testing boundaries, and I'm getting that look in her eye, like she wants to be more independent, she wants to do her own thing, she's going to start to challenge Daddy a little bit, and that's fine. And what I do is I just focus on effective statements. And what effective statements do is they take the deed from the doer. That's what you said. So let me give you some examples. Let me start on the school side of things. We have a student in class who, during the lesson, he or she is having a hard time listening. They're constantly turning to the individual next to them and talking throughout the lesson. Traditionally, when I was in school, it would just be a constant redirection from the teacher and then maybe sent out of the room to the office. But what we're focusing on with effective statements is when this type of situation happens, you turn to the student and you express how you're feeling in that given time as the teacher. I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling frustrated. I tend to stay away from words like I'm angry, although restorative practice actually uses those. They recommend those as possible words, but not something we want to hear teachers saying to students, obviously. They're upset, they're frustrated, they're disappointed in a given situation. That they're not listening to the lesson, they keep interrupting because I've worked so hard to create it. I like to follow that with an additional piece that's even more positive. I know you're a great student and you know how to listen well. And that's really what it sounds like and looks like in the classroom. Down more on a level at our homes, I feel sad, I feel upset, I feel disappointed when you leave your toys in the living room because it's a place for the whole family to enjoy. And I know you know how to clean up well. And I know you think keeping the house clean is important. And you. So effective statements address the concern by letting the student know what emotion you're feeling. And it kind of makes you, as a teacher, the thought process behind it is, it takes you out of that role as just an authoritarian in the classroom and puts you more into a role as a human being that cares about each individual child. I've seen this. I was in a kindergarten class with last week, and great group of kids. And one particular student was having a little bit of trouble with the lesson. He was excited and having a good time. He was trying to learn, trying to focus. And he just needed some redirection in a way like this, instead of constantly being pointed out, which didn't happen, but the teacher was doing a fantastic job just kind of redirecting him, a little bit of playing ignoring. And then I was in there and I said, this is a fantastic opportunity to throw out an effective statement. And I just quietly snuck over to him and I said, it really upsets me to see you not listening to this great lesson, because I know that you can do it, and the teachers were really hard to create it, and you're a great student who has great listening ears. And he looked at me and said, okay, Mr. Caesar, okay. And then he sat down and he did fantastic. I also have seen this fail miserably. So I don't want you to think that this is some magic solution where every time you use an effective statement, it's going to correct behavior like that. It's It's just an additional component to restorative practices and a way of using certain language and communicating with kids that tends to work over time. It's a language shift. This isn't a one-day change. It's a shift in language, and it's a way of talking with your child or students here at the school that, again, doesn't allow them to see you as this disciplinarian, but as an actual person that cares deeply inside about them and about the class as a whole. Going back to effective statements before I get to effective questions is, again, I said that I use it in my home quite a bit with my 7-year-old. And when I first started using effective statements, this is what I get from her. It was time to get ready for school. I'm not always there in the morning when she's getting ready for school. This particular morning I was, and she's giving me a really hard time about getting dressed. We did some pre-teaching the night before, her clothes are out, we're ready to roll, everything's great. I wake up the next morning, she decides 5 minutes before it's time to leave that she is not wearing those clothes. So the way we address this is immediately I start bombarding her with effective statements. It's really upsetting that you're making a decision right now because I know you know we have to leave. I'm disappointed to see you've chosen not to put these clothes on without them before. And I'm getting nowhere. It's just not working. And she turns to me and she says, she said something along the lines of, it's angering me that you're not listening to me, that I don't want to wear these clothes now. And that, I took a step back and like, wait a minute. And this is the last thing you want to do, okay? This headbutting situation that's going on in a lot of homes, obviously across the country, really. That's what you want to avoid. And that's what we also work with our teachers on avoiding, and they do such a fantastic job, is that we never want to be in that situation. So when you're in this situation, how do you solve it? Well, this was early on in the process of utilizing, this approach with her that we started seeing some different behaviors that need to be addressed. And, that spoke volumes to me. She's saying to me how she's feeling in that given situation, and that's something that I didn't have the time to address right there, but when she came home from school later that day, that's when we're going to go into a circle, or I'm just going to work one-on-one with her, and we're going to tease out those feelings. Why was she angry? Why did we choose those clothes the night before if she knew she didn't want to wear them that morning? Did she know that? What was angering her in the morning? Did something bother her? So there's this whole, again, that social emotional piece that needs to be addressed in given situation. When we just ignore it and we just set demands, we don't usually get too far. And we're going to be doing this, yes. What's that?
I have a foreign handle who does that, so I'm curious.
The answer to your question is no. She wore what she took out the night before because she made that choice, and that's the way it goes. So the way I address it is, we had to turn this now into consequence-based, which I don't like to do, but we will if we need to. If you don't put on those clothes, this is going to happen when you get home from school. You're going to lose X, Y, and Z. Well, the clothes went on like that. And again, we try to avoid going down that punitive path, but sometimes we need to go there. Just like, Keith will also say, and myself, that we try to avoid giving students consequences, but there also are times where you need to, give a consequence while still putting in the restorative model. I think that's the important component. And the consequence, of course, has to, match what occurred. Effective questions, moving to this. So we talked about the group circles, we talked about effective statements. Effective questions is the last component that goes hand in hand with an impromptu small conference. So those are the 4 components. The circles, the effective statements, and then effective questions and small impromptu conferences with students. And I like to put the two together, effective questions and small conferences, because the questions are happening during the conference. We have a conflict with a couple students in class. It's time to bring them together because it rises to that level where we need to have a small conference. And in that small conference, these questions come right from the International Institute of Restorative Practices in Pennsylvania. They ask schools to utilize these questions. You can actually read them there's two different cue cards, if you will. And there's questions for the student that has done the harm and questions for a student that has been harmed in a given situation. And I always go off script. I follow these as best I can, but things start to come up in the conference and you end up going off script, if you will. And again, for those who have been harmed, what did you think and feel when you realized what happened? So they start processing through the situation. How did it impact you and maybe other people? What's been the hardest thing? And what needs to happen to make things right? Every time I get to that question, that's when I usually start to get a little more emotion from students. Because I think that they realize someone's caring about making things right and the harm that's been done, correcting it. And sometimes they don't know how to answer it. So we have to work through what that's going to look like. And this is all done with the student next to them that may have done the harm. May have said something inappropriate, may have put their hand on them in a way that they didn't need to cause harm, but it did in a given situation. It may have been some frustration. And we start to work through and process the entire situation that happened. And the questions below are for those that have actually committed the harmful act, and we just start with what happened. You want them to know they're being hurt. This isn't, well, you did this, so we're here to hammer. I had jury duty a couple of years ago, and when I was an assistant principal and special ed coordinator in Stratford, and I was sitting there and I was being questioned by an attorney because I was being chosen for the jury. And he asked me what my job was, and I told him my job. And he said, oh, so you're quote unquote a hammer. And I thought to myself, no, I'm not the hammer. I said, my job, and I tell kids this here at the school, my job is not to bring you into the office and give you, a consequence for everything you do and punish you. My job, just like Mr. Margolus' job, is to solve problems. Solve problems. You're coming to me because there's a problem, most likely. Not all the time, but when I get involved with certain situations, when Mr. Margolus gets involved, decent percent of the time, sometimes there's problems, there's great things happening to get involved. And we're there to solve the problem, not to just drop the hammer on students. So again, what happened? What were you thinking and feeling at the time? Who's been affected by what you've done and how? And what can and will you do to try to make things better? This number 3 is important to me. Who's been affected? It's important that student starts to reflect on the damage that they may have done in a given situation. They have to process that out. Who exactly has been affected by the harm that they've done? And then we talk about how that other person might be feeling that's been harmed. And of course, one of my really important pieces here is what were you thinking and feeling at the time? When I work with students that have done the harm, number 2 is important to me because I need to start learning from them. Are they feeling angry a lot? Are they feeling upset about something that happened maybe before school, during school, after school, the day before? And it's important to process out with them why they're feeling the emotions that they do, because there may be a deeper concern that we're not addressing in the school, and we need to. We need to come together as a team, the family as well. But a lot of times, these are quick conferences. We address the problem. We feel like we've solved it. Those students feel better about themselves in a given situation, and then we head back to class and we'll do a check-in during the day.
I'm just curious how you address the fact that when the needs are addressed by any adult in the school, not in a relationship, parents, whatever, there's an obvious power differential. And is that something that is always remembered? Because if you go up to a student or your own children and say, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, or whatever, I believe it doesn't address the underlying cause of why kids do what they do. And then it becomes like, I'm going to just try to please you, or I'm going to try to do the right thing because you're powerful presence in the situation. And I know that this is being brought up, and I just want to know how.
That's a great point. Well, I think the way to address that is, aside from just those effective statements where you're letting them know how you're feeling in a given situation, you start to bring in the other components of restorative practices, and you also start to work together in the school as a team if a student is having a really tough time in a given situation. The conversations that need to happen with students to address your specific question should not be like you towering over the student, letting them know how you feel about a given situation. But you need to get down to their level, and you need to let them know you're upset about how they're behaving in a given situation, but we're going to work together to solve it because you know that they're a great student and you can do it together. And the way it's addressed in the classroom with effective statements, we don't like to publicly shame students. And I think the public shaming really takes place when we have a teacher constantly redirecting and then sending them out of the room. Letting them know that there's this community feel in the classroom, and you're upset as a teacher when they might be interrupting their lesson, but you know that they can do better, I think lets the students know that you have their best interests at heart, because they need to know that as a teacher, you have feelings too. And as students, they need to know that they're being heard as well. It's a two-way street. So I think there needs to be constant dialogue, and not, again, this point of view of adult as disciplinarian, child as the one that listens and just conforms to the norm because the adult has told you to. But every child needs to know that they're cared. And that's one of the things that I think Keith has done so well. I walked into this. I'm building that foundation here where children feel excited about school. Children feel loved by the staff. They don't feel like someone's here to just hammer them and give them a consequence in a given situation, but that we work as a team. And I know you saw in the video, that was my message to the 5th grade. This is a community. We're here for each other. This isn't, you guys are struggling in the cafeteria. We need to know why. But we're working together to solve it. What you didn't see in the video is there is a deeper conversation that I have with the students about how they're feeling about the cafeteria. Why are they upset? What do they feel like needs to be changed? Do they feel like they've been treated unfairly at times by the staff? And if so, what does that look like? And one student in particular, as Keith said, because of the sensitivity of the topic, privacy of it all, one student really shared out nicely, and explained how he was feeling when he had to work with the staff in the cafeteria. So that sends off, red flags to us about what we need to do moving forward in the cafeteria. How do we need to now speak to the staff, do a retraining about working with the students, which we already tackled. And what does that look like and how do we move forward? So it is extremely important, and one of the great things Keith has always put in here is that students have a voice here. They need to be heard. They need to be understood. This is not us versus them. This is a community where we work together. So it's a great point. And then just to finish up, the resolving student conflict and confrontation, again, is where those effective questions come. You get into sort of a private area with the students and work through the situation using those questions. Finally, choose kind is a message throughout the building, which you're well aware of, and so are the students. And we feel like, and I've always felt like since utilizing restorative practices in the short amount of time we have, rolling this out, that the choose kind message naturally comes through in the restorative conference. We are keeping calm and noticing each other's feelings during that conference. We're identifying the problem and talking it out. We're certainly noticing others' viewpoints. And then we finally come to a solution. We come to how have we resolved this and how do we move forward from there. And, we keep data on who we're seeing, how often we're seeing them, and we are not naive to think that just one restorative conference solves the world. We certainly are doing check-ins with students throughout the day that have had, these situations come up before, making sure that they're in a good place, things are going well, do they need anything, do they feel supported. These are real conversations happening throughout the day between our staff and students. Are there any other questions that I can answer? I know that was a quick run. Yes, so one of the first things that Keith wanted to address was let's roll this out immediately. A fantastic tool our teacher school does use along with other trainings they've had. We've had multiple trainings already, not just with our teachers, but I've led, and Katie Reeves has trained in restorative practices as well. She's led as well. And we've also been doing some trainings with the entire staff, which includes our parents. So those that are on recess, at lunch, and working with students on the building. As a matter of fact, Mr. Mike has been in training as well, so is Mr. Lane. Because again, he deeply believes, as do I, that this is an entire community, and we need to work together. All those individuals I mentioned are working with our students on a daily basis. So they have to have and know what we're doing, what our expectations are.
Yeah, we have some experience of starting experiences with Mr. DeCesare, but it's something we're going to have touch points across the year to sort of check how is this going, what else do the teachers need to know and understand. In fact, in part that video is to serve as a model for other staff on how we can conduct surveys and things like that. So we still have some work to do too.
And we reached out to Joanne anyway, staying on Friday for the same. She's actually going to come back, which we're excited about to work with the staff. Probably in March, around March, trying to get her earlier. She handles all bullying complaints to the state, goes through her, all that data goes through Joanne, as well as the restorative approach. Yes.
Situation with the classroom, the cafeteria, does that, did you notify parents that then is there any communication?
I mean, the hope is that these kinds of, this was like a model, right? Like we're all learning, all the fifth grade teachers piled in the room, I'm in there learning about the circle. But the hope is that this is a fairly routine, not every day, but once in a while that a classroom is conducting this. This isn't just in a response to like, we've got a situation that we want to change. But some of those earlier questions that Nick had up there were community-based questions, like what would we not change about our classroom, right? One's a little lighter. What would we change? And so these are ongoing, it's really an ongoing community device as just bring this in when there's a problem. Whereas what Nick talked about with these small group conference, that's a conflict resolution sort of thing. So no, I mean, it's supposed to be eventually just part of what we do.
I would think that there were any standout situations where a child said something that you kind of,
Right.
you would.
Well, in those small conferences, you know, I mean, Nick's been jumped right in on this. If it's serious or semi-serious, he's calling parents and saying, hey, I met with your child today. This is why.
And it's a good point. I mean, if something came out of that conference, like a child making a statement about self-injurious behavior or something along those lines, that we need to continue to really about when the first years reach out to families. But when I have those restorative conferences, touch base with the families, always a great thing to do too. Usually the child will want to talk about the experience. And then sometimes the parents will reach out to me and there's a little bit more work to do. They feel like maybe the child hasn't gone home and said that they still don't feel comfortable about something. Again, like I said earlier, I think everything's just handled and solved with one restorative conference. A lot of times it is, but often we come back to the table and talk about some other things about it. The Institute, the International Institute of Restorative Practices on their website, the school, I don't want to say anything, but they have a whole host, they actually have a Burning Bridges documentary on there too that they sell. There's a whole host of books that they have on there in restorative practices. Some of the books just focus on small group conferences, some focus on restorative practices as a whole, some just focus on effective statements and what that should look like and feel like when you go out there in the school.
What's that?
The Burning Bridges documentary is really fantastic. It's eye-opening. The emotion behind it is really amazing.
Yeah, really, should they mention, because I'm really curious, why post-interview with the kids to be like, how did this affect your life?
Yeah, and it just saw, which is written this about a year and a half ago, talks about where the kids are now. They're in their 30s, early 40s, or just turned 30. And I never knew that they had to pay that money. I knew they didn't go to prison, and the judge made his ruling based on watching this formal restorative conference, and he said that weighed heavily on how he made his decision not to go that punitive route, to go restitution. Some of them are on payment plans now, so paying back. It's really, but you know, people have to be comfortable going that way. I've heard of restorative conferences. There was another case, a woman who does it for me. She does a fantastic TED Talk, and I can't remember her name. It's going to bother me. That's a horrible, really sad story, but her husband, who was an unbelievable athlete, I think like an Olympic athlete, they were leaving a New Year's Eve party, and they had told a neighbor they would check on their house to make sure the kids that were there were okay, because the adults were away. So they left the New Year's Eve party, and Katie's husband went to go check on the house with a friend, and they were having this wild 150 kid party with all kinds of inappropriate things going on at the party. Well, at the party he was killed. He went in to break it off, and he was killed by the teenagers at the party. So the story focuses on the fact that Katie, which I'm most positive it takes a restorative approach. And when they finally, about 4 or 5 years later, they charged 2 teenagers. And she decides to sit down